So we got this side corrected. Our quarter panel's going to fit super nice. Everything's going to, it's all very, very close. Once we pinch and clamp everything, it's going to be nice and tight. Now I don't have the hinges for the door yet, but I want to move forward. So there's a couple things we can do here. The best thing to do is to set your door, and you want the bottom of the door to be perfectly aligned so you have a nice gap at the rocker. Now, the height of that also has to coincide with the height of this. So you want to get both of those to work together. Now we know that that height sits okay when it's locked on the door pin. Now we know we have lots of adjustment on the pin. We can actually see the back of it. Now when it is locked on the pin, our gap is absolutely perfect. Let me see if we can see that. That's about as good as it's going to get. So the height of the pin in the post, which as you can see, this there's lots of room here and here. So this can move up and down, back and forth. So we got plenty of adjustment, but even so, we're sitting somewhere in the middle, which gives us an adjustment in each direction. Now I know that when the quarter was on, it felt like it could be a little tighter, but it could be that the door's got to come out. But judging by the rocker, it looks really good. Now what we did notice, the top of the door is out. That means the top up here has to be slightly pulled in, and at that point we'll have to move the pin in a little bit. Now we might not concentrate on that yet because we don't want the pin to drop if we loosen it, because we've got our height. So we know that's got to lean in. We can live with that for now, and it's not very much. But the other thing we can look at is our door in relation to the rocker panel here. Now, we suspected that it was way too tight, but it's hard to be sure because you don't know if the quarter's got to go back or forth. And I said it could go back about a 1/16 to be absolutely perfect when we had it test fit, which is just a matter of clamping it tighter to the back as we install it. So not a big deal. But we do have to create a gap because it was pretty much rubbing. Like you can see, even the support structure inside is down here looks good, but up here it's almost touching the edge of the door. But if we come down here, our fender comes up and goes along the door. Now that gap is usually about the same. So that's how far ahead our door needs to come. And if you look at that difference between the door and the rocker, that's about what the gap should be. So what we'll do next is we're going to bring that door this way. We're going to leave that pin where it is for height, but we're going to bring the door this way. And by loosening these bolts and these bolts, the door won't move this way or that way, but we'll be able to push it forward. So we're going to shove the door, and like I say, not quite all the way, but probably about 80-90% of the way of that gap. And I think that's going to give us about a paint stick, pretty close, worth a gap at this end. Our bottom will stay the same, and I think that's going to make us pretty happy. So that's what we're going to do to line up the door temporarily, because we still have to come in here and change the pins. So what that means is once we set the door to where we want it to live, we can go ahead and do our quarter panel. But later on, we will have to readjust that because of the door pins. We have to do it anyway. So even though it seems like you're doing stuff 2-3 times, we're not adjusting the door to its final position. All we're doing is putting the door where we want it to live in retrospect to what it's going to, well, that's probably the wrong word, but you get the idea. Basically, in relations to where it's going to be with the rear quarter panel, we want them to both set up, and it's all going to work out. So what I'm saying is we're close. We're not that far off. We're going to be able to go ahead and do that work. And I haven't even looked at the other side, but we'll do that right on camera. We know this side's way too tight. Now we do have to fix the corner of this door. It's bent in down there. But I can tell even with that that's got to go forward as well. So basically we know both doors have to come forward. I don't know if you remember from the other videos. Way too tight. But that's okay. If we go forward relatively a paint stick worth, we'll get it most of the way there. And I mean, this car, when it was brand new, I'm going to be honest, the thickness of a paint stick, at least the ones I use, now you got to be careful. A lot of companies changed those paint sticks a while back. They got thinner, but they are prettier. It's almost like they're planed real smooth, almost like they're shiny. They're so perfect, but they are thinner. So keep in mind, if you make your gap too tight here, and you match it to this one and it's also too tight, your fenders may sit back trying to get them back enough. Could mess up a lot of the alignment of the rest of the front end. You know, maybe you end up with a hood that's shooting too far forward. So sometimes you'll set that all up and the front end will be a little bit out of whack. And I mean, the solution to that is now you got to loosen everything, move your fenders forward, and then center your door, make the gap a little bigger on each side. Now, if you want perfect show car gaps, you can weld the edges, you can cut the fenders, move them around. You can do all those things, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But to get the car initially built, we're going for relatively close to stock, because we want the car as close to what it was originally before we do the modifications. So again, you're going to do work 2, 3, 4 times. It's going to be annoying, but it's just part of the deal. It is what it is. It's what you have to kind of do to get there. So we're going to get there. But yeah, she's coming along nice. We got some nice welds and some ugly welds. We're going to give that a quick grind and clean it up. If we could have got a nice spot like this and ran it all the way down, that's great. The problem is you don't want to throw in so much heat that you warp the hell out of it. Now, as we went, we did a bit of hammer welding while the welds were hot, because you could see places that would sink, and then you'd come back and weld beside it. While it was warm, you could kind of knock it back. So we're really careful to bring that in. And even though this didn't line up everywhere, we have a little bit of a pucker right here because of where it was tacked, where in the 3 places. But again, there's a little bit of a sink right there. But once we grind that out, we could knock that up. But look, because of where this is, it's really not going to be an issue in any way. The main thing with this is to dress it a little bit. Put a big light on it, check for pinholes, because even though this looks real solid, let's check that right now. Guaranteed I'm going to find 1, if not like maybe 4 pinholes. There's 1 right there, 2. There's 1 up here, there it is. You see that flash? Pinhole there. And 1 down there. Okay, so we got about 4 pinholes that we can see. We welded that pretty solid, so probably won't find none there. But we're not going to worry about those right now, because we're going to dress that so that we can, put something on there and seal it. Because condensation forms, I keep talking about this, it's not about driving in the rain or driving in the weather. It's not about stuff coming up underneath the car. When the car's sitting in the driveway, sitting at the car show, sitting wherever, it's cool in the morning, starts to get warm. Between this panel and this panel, you get condensation. That's what caused all this. So the condensation basically runs down, drips. It's going to drip all over here. So you don't want water getting in these pins, right? This can't be outside and inside now. This has to be dressed and at least primed or something. You have to have that sealed. You don't want water getting in any little pores. Now the other thing, we're going to go underneath the fender with the wheel off, underneath the wheelhouse I should say, and any little gaps or weird spots, we're going to check that out with a nice light. We might have to weld a couple little spots underneath in case there's any voids or anything like that, just so that we can dress the bottom and clean it up. Now it's welded really well, so most of it came through, but there's a few places where I noticed you might see what's left of where the joint was. You'll see like a little edge of the panel. Well, that means it didn't go quite deep enough there. Now we know there's a spot up here somewhere, likely where that little pinhole was, but we're going to come in from underneath. We're going to weld that, but only after we weld the pinhole from the top, because we don't want a little void pointed up where stuff can get down. So we'll weld those after we dress it on the top, and before we dress the bottom, we'll double check, make sure that there ain't, and I mean there might be 2-3 inches of this whole thing where we might find, a few places that voided. You want to make sure that you're running your welder hot. This is a Lincoln 180 and I'm running it at B. And we got it turned all the way up to 5 for feed. It's pretty hot at that point. And the nice thing about that is it's going to penetrate and it'll create a weld on the bottom, much like the top. Anyway, we'll do another video later in the day. Thanks for watching.